Mitzvah 166 is a completely different subject than we spoke about last time. And this is a Torah law. Rabbinic law has changed this. Rabbinic law has altered this a little bit. But by Torah law, when a woman gives birth, she becomes ritually impure for 7 days after she's had a boy, and for 14 days after she's had a girl. That is a Torah law. Now, nowadays the woman is. That means after 7 days she could immerse it and she's permissible to her husband, even if she is still bleeding, because that blood is not, by Torah law, that's not considered regular menstrual blood. In our day and age, the halacha is that any sighting of blood whatsoever in a woman becomes ritually impure. So that's a rabbinic law. But in the days, back in the day, when in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when she would bring offerings, then what do you call it? Then that becomes 7 days for a male and 14 days for a female. Now, the reason a birth, by the way, a miscarriage is only after 40 days. As close as they could calculate 40 days of conception, then it's only considered a viable fetus after 40 days. If she's miscarried before 40 days, that's not considered a birth. Interestingly enough, the word Vlad, which is an embryo, is the numerical value of 40. Vav Lamed Dalet. Vav is 6, Lamed is 30, and Dalet is 4. Vlad is 40 days. That's why you can daven for the gender. When a woman has conceived, and you can daven for the gender of the child, meaning that you want it to be a boy, you can daven up to 40 days. After 40 days is the fait accompli. After 40 days, the gender of the child is already determined. That's what the halacha says. Now let's try to understand this a little bit. Why? Again, another classic example of Torah being harsher on the females. Right? 7 days for a boy, 14 days for a girl. So first of all, let's dispel that myth right off the bat, because there is many statements that are pro women as what would seem derogatory to women in Torah. Number one, Torah is not anti-women. Husband has the full obligation of supporting his wife. Wife does not have to support her husband. If a woman decides to quit her job, her husband has no halachic recourse. If a woman comes up and says, I quit my job, how come there's nothing the husband could do? He can say, thank you for everything you've done up until this point. A man decides he doesn't want to support the family. In the time when the Beis Din had authority, they would flog him until he changes his attitude. What do you mean you're not going to support her? You sure are going to support her. Well, I don't think so. So all he does is the big guy brings out a piece of rawhide, and the guy says, well, maybe work ain't so bad after all, right? And then, so that's obviously not anti-women. There's a clear statement that women have a greater intuition than men. Men may have a greater logic than women. Women have a greater, which is better, to be emotional or to be logical? Which is better? Be emotional or to be logical? The one is better than the other. It depends what they're used for. If a 3-year-old falls and scrapes his knee, and the mother goes over and says, here, I'll kiss the boo-boo. She'll go like that, kiss the boo-boo. Okay? If the father says, come on, let's be logical about this. We all know that kissing a boo-boo doesn't help. Well, that's not the time. That's not the time to be logical. That's the time for being emotional. There's certain people. We are not. Rav Shiller once said, humans are not logical. We are psychological. We're very complex creatures. We're made up of a lot of different components, and their relationships. Relationships are not always based on logic, and then often they're not based on logic at all. Often half the logic, half the emotion, half the connection that you make with somebody is based on a feeling, in a sense, not a logical connection. Sometimes you make a friend in yeshiva, and the reason you make friends with him, you don't even know why you like the guy. Oh, you didn't see that. Well, let's see. I like the way I like the color of his clothing, and that he wears the same shoes as me. It's not a logical thing. Human beings are very feelings, and therefore it's not a good or a bad. There's a statement that the Jewish people got out of Egypt in the merit of the women who were righteous. There's a statement that it was the men who worshipped the golden calf and the women didn't. They were resistant to it. There's statements that women are on a higher spiritual level. So then everybody asks, what about the bracha that I'm happy God didn't make me a woman? Shelo asani isha. There's a very logical answer to that too. Very logical answer. Before you get into anything spiritual about privileges to do the mitzvah and who's not, before you get to any of that, ask any woman, who's got a more difficult physical existence, men or women? Ask any woman. Every woman will tell you women have a more difficult physical existence. For one thing, they got to live with men. right? That right there is a difficult existence, right? Number two, every month they go through pain. Their systems are constantly changing. They could be either in physical pain, they could be, their hormones are completely unpredictable. A woman could be after birth. She could be giving birth. Ever been in a maternity ward when a woman gives birth? Try it sometime, gentlemen. Then you're going to say that bracha with intense kavanah. Intense kavanah. First time I took my wife to give birth, we walked in there to the nurses at the nurse. My wife is, ready to go, and the nurse is filling out a form at the nurses station. Was that your father's middle initial? Was that a B or a D? And I was standing there looking, she's going to give birth. And all of a sudden I hear a blood-curdling scream from down the hall. Ah! So I expect to see doctors running, lights flashing, code blue, something. And then she just says again, did you say David? Or I said, well, what was that? She says to me, what? So I said, well, there was a scream just now. She said, oh, that was just a woman giving birth. They're screaming. And then you think to yourself, Shaloah, Sani Isha. Right? It has nothing to do with spiritual. We're not spiritual at all. It has nothing to do with spiritual. So there's nothing derogatory, deprecating, or anything else in the Torah about women. It is different. It is different. Not only that, there's a statement the Talmud makes, Noshim daiton kalos aleihem. Women have a lighter mind. What does that mean? Sounds pretty derogatory, doesn't it? Sounds deprecating. The answer is, who, in your opinion, so you don't hear it from me, the extremist Orthodox rabbi, who, in your opinion, is more capable of multitasking, women or men? Women. Ever watch a man? When I'm doing something at home, I'm fully into it. A woman could be doing several things at once. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that usually her role? When a woman is in the home, she's doing several things at once. When I'm in the home, if I got to take care of anything, I got to be told to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for my kids. That's a project. When I do it, it's like, I'm into it. Nobody talk to me right now. Don't stand back now. I'm making peanut butter and jelly. And I'm smearing it on. I'm touching every. For a woman, she's in the middle of baking. She's in the middle of feeding the baby, and she comes over. What do you want? You want, Mommy? I'm hungry. Okay, come here. Yeah, peanut butter and jelly. It's ready to go. My wife said to me once, watching me make it. She said, if men fed the kids, they'd probably starve, which is true, right? Which is very likely to be true. I can only do even Pesach cleaning. If I'm doing something, I'm bringing something down. My wife asks me to do something. So, I'm either bringing down boxes from the attic, or I'm putting paper on the counter or something. My wife starts asking me, not now. I can't hear anything else right now. Right now I'm with the aluminum foil, right? You need something, write it down. I'll deal with that later. I can't hear two things at once. A man studies Torah. He's fully concentrated. I can't have my kids coming into me in the room. A mother is able to multitask. She could stop what she's doing, go away, come back to it. That's what it means that they are light-minded. Light-minded doesn't mean that they're less intelligent. Light-minded simply means their mind is capable of not being totally focused on one thing and then being frustrated by an interruption like men are. When I talk to my wife, when one of the kids comes into the room, my wife could turn to the kid, ask them what they need. I get very frustrated. I'm in the middle of talking. I'm in the middle of a sentence. We're trying to work something out. She's all over the place. It's a reality of life. There's nothing deprecating about it. To the contrary, in many cases, when I'm home when my wife was giving birth, I had to take care of the kids. You can, as a father, it doesn't matter how much you love your kids. You could go mad. You go mad taking care of little kids, because I take care of the kids. First you change the baby's diaper, then you put some food in the oven, and you go back to change another diaper. Then you break up a fight. Then you have to go check on the food. Then you have to go break up another fight. Then the baby's crying again, so you got to rock the baby. And that's the first 10 minutes. That was just the first 10 minutes. We haven't even started yet. And a woman's able to do this effortlessly because nothing she does she get heavily involved with that she can't break the contact. And she's designed that way by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because otherwise she would go mad. It's the same thing with, if I would ask you stereotypically, who is more prompt and time conscious in your experience, men or women? Women are more prompt and time conscious? Or in the stereotypical TV show, it's always the husband who's waiting for his wife till she's ready to go to a wedding, and the wedding started a half hour ago, and she's at the height of preparations. She's walking back and forth several times, putting on makeup and changing again, and doing something, brushing her hair, and she even walks past the husband and said, aren't you going to get ready? I am ready. I changed my belt. And she's walking back and forth. Now, there's a reason for that, because that's why women are exempt from the time-bound mitzvahs. Because a woman could not be, with her primary role as homemaker, she can't be limited by time-bound mitzvahs. If she's taking care of a 6-week-old baby who needs to nurse, she can't say, well, just wait a second, hold off, Stanley, while I daven Kriyash, while I say Kriyash and daven Shachris, because I have a time that I have to hit. She can't be bound by time. That's not her role. So the Torah comes over here and the Torah says, you know what? There's a difference over here as well. A woman, after giving birth to a son, she is tamei for 7 days. She is impure for 7 days. For a daughter, it's 14 days. Why is that? Why is there a difference between the son and the daughter? So there are several ideas. There are several ideas that the Torah mentions over here. First of all, the ritual impurity. Why does a woman ever have any tumah at all? Where did the whole idea of menstruation? Where did that come from? Right. It was the original sin. Had Adam not transgressed the original sin, children would be born. There would be no pain in childbirth. There would be no menstruation. There would be no illness in the world. There would be no physical pain. Nothing. Everything would be wonderful. No one would ever sprain an ankle. No one would ever be in any pain, any discomfort. Every time a couple cohabited, they'd have a child. There would be no loss of any sort of life potential. As a result of the original sin, which Chava triggered off, she is punished with this. Now, when a woman gives birth to a daughter, that means a double whammy of impurity is now in the potential there, because it's another female. And therefore, for the second female, she has to have her 7 days of impurity, and then the 7 days of impurity for this female, who one day will also be there, which is one of the things the commentaries say. Whereas for a male, you don't have that second, even though there are potentials of impurity for a male. But the main source, the most severe form of human impurity is that, and therefore the commentaries point out that's why she has to sit 7 days. Yeah, go ahead.
So after your wife gives birth, you're not allowed to touch her, physically touch her.
She has got the status of a woman who has menstruated, what's called a nida. She has got not only after she's given birth, as soon as the cervix opens, and she's already in the active birth process, then she is off limits. Correct.
So you don't touch her at all.
But you can't touch her at all unless she needs it absolutely for a medical purpose. Unless she absolutely, it's a medical purpose. Otherwise, just to support her, you can't do that. To give her emotional support, that you cannot do. Okay, that is the halacha, among other halachas. That is deraisa. No. The not touching is derabbanan. Right. All the safeguards are derabbanan, according to most commentaries.
You're just not allowed to sleep with that one.
Right, according to some most commentaries. Now, that's actually different opinions, but that's any affectionate touching would be prohibited. But there are different opinions on that. Now, here there's another reason. This also has to do with human human nature. There's another one of the other commentaries also suggests it's the father is the role model for the son, the mother is the role model for the daughter. That's true. Your children will always imitate you. Children imitate parents. They pay mommy and daddy. The boys are usually daddy. The girls are mommy. If they're not, then check on your parenting policies. But that's generally the way it should be. The girls should be wearing the wedding dress. But there's another idea here that the mother being the role model of the daughter, and one of the most important things in a Jewish home is the laws of family purity. That's one of the things that's given to women. You'll notice that the important things are given to the women to take care of because they're more conscientious in halacha. The men always know the leniencies and the shortcuts. The women, when they do something, they do it right. So the women are in charge of family purity. The women are in charge of kashrus in the home. If a man was running the kitchen, it would be treif in 5 minutes. That's why, when men come into the kitchen, the women are always watching them. Watch couples where the husband comes into the kitchen, the wife watches him like a hawk. As soon as he picks up a spoon, that's a parva spoon, that's a flavor, right? True or not true? The women, as soon as the husband walks into a kitchen, the wife is just, she's all of a sudden, her senses are heightened. She looks like a cobra about to strike. She's just watching, Put that back, that's milk. No, that's hot. No, that's the wrong oven. No, you can't have that with your coffee. That was baked in a fleishik oven. She's all over him. Right? And that's why, because they take their jobs very seriously. If you put the men in charge of family purity, the men would find all the leniencies. And the women are in charge of it because the women have less of a Yetzer Hara and a much more conscientious nature, so the women are in charge of that. Same thing when it comes to being a role model. The mother is a role model for her daughter for tznius, for the laws of family purity. And therefore the Torah says that when a girl is born, the mother already emphasizing the mother's role, there's a double level of impurity. That's what the commentary suggests. But there's really one main reason here, what I would call the main reason, which is, let's leave Judaism out for a second. Let's leave Judaism out. Let's imagine your average non-Jew, and his wife is giving birth. His wife's pregnant for the first time. What do you think a husband wants, a boy or a girl? A boy. I don't think that's a universal. That's a universal. The father, you want a boy, and that exists in all. Do you know that by the Arabs? A friend of mine told me he once went into the hospital to visit his wife, and there was an Arab woman there who had just given birth to a daughter, and she was crying. So he asked her, she, poor lady, she just gave birth, she was crying. He said, "Why are you crying?" She said she just gave birth to her third daughter, and in their law, if you've given birth to three daughters without a boy, then the husband is now allowed to take a second wife. Husband didn't visit her, father-in-law, mother-in-law, nobody visited her in the hospital. It's considered a major disappointment. And in Judaism, being that we are human beings, when a boy is born, there is a certain bracha that is made. It is a bracha of Hatov Umetiv. Hatov Umetiv, as God is good and He has bestowed goodness on us. When a girl is born, a bracha is made also. It's a Shehechiyanu bracha. Shehechiyanu v'kiyimanu v'genu zman hazeh, because when a girl is born, it's certainly a moment of joy. But it's not the same joy as a boy. And therefore, there are two brachas. This is an upgraded bracha. And you see, what's unique about Jews in Judaism is we're not afraid to admit the truth. We're not afraid. We all know. You walk up to the father and you say, "What do you want, a boy or a girl?" He says, "Doesn't matter as long as it's healthy." And as soon as his wife is out of earshot, he says, "And there's a bris." Mm-hmm. All right? That's the truth. Because a man, a father, a man. Now, what the commentaries explain is that a woman, what she wants more than anything else, that her husband should be pleased. And she is happier with a boy than she is with a girl, because she wants her husband to be pleased. And therefore, for the girl, there's a 2-week period before she resumes her relationship with her husband. With the boy, she's already more eager to resume the relationship, because after all, this was exactly what she wanted. She had the boy. And therefore, for the boy, there's a 7-day period. Now, I know from personal experience, we have boys and girls in the house, I know from personal experience, it's ridiculous. When there's a boy or a girl, you go into you go into the hospital, in the waiting room of a doctor's office. When it's dressed in blue, you got an infant dressed in blue, a little baby dressed in blue. The other women who are sitting there, you go to the doctor's office, the older woman sitting there next to you, and she sees the baby in blue, she's like, "Hi, good. What's his name?" She's playing with the baby. When it's a girl, you're holding a little pink package, and she says, "Oh, Mazel Tov." She goes right back to her book and starts reading. Doesn't kuch. I'll get to you 1 second. My wife was once having difficulty at the end of a pregnancy. She was right at the end of the 8th month, and there was a little problem, so she had to be kept in the hospital in case she goes into labor. So she's in the hospital. So I was visiting her every day in the maternity ward. Now this is about the only happy section of the hospital. So I'm in the maternity ward. I come in every day. There are all these other women who are ready to give birth, and they're all on what's called Shmirat Hirayon. It's a birth watcher. They're just under what do you call it? Most of them don't need treatment. They just have to be under supervision. So every day you'd be walking in there, and there were certain days where I was there when the nurses changed shifts. So they would say to each other, "Okay, what happened with Goldstein?" I said she had a girl, so the nurse coming out, she used to say, "Mazel Tov." What happened to Cohen? She had a boy. Mazel Tov. It was unbelievable, the reaction of the nurses when they heard that it was a boy versus a girl. These are women. It's a reality in life. And therefore the Torah says, since the mother is happier with the boy, she wants to resume her relationship sooner. Therefore the Torah only puts her off limits for 7 days as opposed to 14 days. Somebody had a question. Go ahead. Again, your first name is?
Isaac.
Isaac, right.
I actually had 2.
Go ahead.
The first was about why the woman would have to feel any guilt whatsoever about boy versus girl when it's scientifically the man who's responsible for gender.
That question of guilt. You mean that Arab woman in the hospital? You're absolutely right. But at the bottom line is, that's their law. Their law is that you have a girl, and the Muslim law is 3 girls, and you have another. Why they made the law, blame the wife. Why blame the man? But that's Muslim. It's not only scientifically, by the way. It has to do with various merits that people have. But The idea that why are people like that? You can't. I remember a man saying to me once, "Well, if my wife would ever give me a son, it's not. It takes two to tango, buddy. It's not her fault." I know one family I know in my neighborhood have 10 daughters. They have a run of 10 daughters. Think about that. There's another. My daughter. He has a friend. He has 12 daughters. A friend of hers. She's one of 12 girls and one boy. The boy sits next to the father on Shabbos, yeah. 12 girls and one boy in the family. I think they have like four, and then a boy, and then another 8. So that, the attitude here also, you have to be very, very careful. We're thrilled with a girl. A child, there's no greater gift than a child. Daughters, sons. But human nature is that there's more of an event when a boy is born. It's more of an event. A boy, a bris, a shalom zachar, it's more of an event, and it's the continuity of the family name. That's really what it is, and that's for everybody by nature wants it. When in England, when they gave birth, when Charles, Charles Charles or Harry or whatever it was, the prince had a baby. There's a big celebration because he had a boy. What's the baby's name? George. Who's the father? Not Harry. William. Harry's the little brother dressed as a Nazi uniform, right? Yeah. William had a boy, and also it's a major celebration because it's a continuity. If he would have had a good daughter, it would not have been the same celebration. It just wouldn't. And if he had a daughter, the son was a major event, and that's a continuity of the throne. That's a major event, and the continuity is the boy, not the girl. Okay, you can have the queen is the continuity, but because her father was George also, right? He didn't have any sons, so she took the throne. But that's human nature. Second question, Isaac.
I was wondering for some more explanations to process why one cannot touch his wife while she's in labor.
Okay, good question.
To support her.
Okay, the idea is like this. The idea is a very good question. The rabbis came along, and in the laws of family purity, the rabbis enacted an entire set of rules. Among these rules are a husband is not allowed to hand an object directly to his wife when she is anita. You can't hand your wife a spoon. You can't hand her. You have to put it down on the table. She has to take it. You cannot sit on a bench that wobbles. If it's firmly, because it's there's a chance they'll bang into each other. A wife is not allowed, when she serves her husband, she can't put the plate directly in front of him. She has to put it a little farther away, and then he pulls it over. The idea behind it is that anything, first of all, any sort of touching whatsoever doesn't take much that could lead to more touching. And then it could lead to a Torah prohibition. And that's human nature, because humans are very weak, number one. Then anything that is called an act of affection, an affection act, like a wife serving her husband, so that creates a bond of affection between them. Therefore, she has to put it over here as just a bit of a reminder, and the husband pulls it over. That's just a reminder of where things are holding. A wife cannot make her husband's bed in his presence, because the bed carries certain implications. A husband cannot see his wife lying on his bed. Not allowed to see his own wife lying on his bed, because the beds aren't allowed to be touching each other. The beds have to be separated. Anything that could lead, and we recognize that even the slightest touch could lead to more. And therefore the rabbis enacted that and once a woman is halachically off limits, if they end up with the bigger sin, so then it's a very, very severe, it's a very, very severe avera. Therefore they enacted these safeguards like they do in all other areas. Good.
So is Shomer Negia totally d'Rabbanan?
Shomer Negia, it depends to what extent. First of all, according to some, it is a Torah law. According to some, it's a Torah law. Second of all, according to many, it's a rabbinic law. But more than that, there is a spiritual component as well in that area, which is that the Talmud makes a statement: God hates immorality. So even if it is not a technical transgression of a Torah law, it creates a tremendous prosecution against the person who's done it. It's considered a very severe avera. Any breach in that area is considered as a very severe avera. Number one. Number two, this idea of rabbinic law, where people say, is it only a rabbinic law? It has to be very, very clear. I'm glad you asked this, because this is extremely important. A lot of people are not clear on this. A rabbinic law is 100% binding. It's not like we have an option, it's only rabbinic law. Rabbinic law means that a person is accountable because it is a halacha, it is in Shulchan Aruch, he has transgressed a law. Whether or not the law, it's like almost like asking about the Constitution, was this in the original Constitution or was this in an amendment to the Constitution? It doesn't matter, either way he goes to jail if he breaks the law. It is an amendment, it's a rabbinic amendment. The rabbinic amendment carries a severity as well, it's extremely, extremely severe. So perhaps he cannot be punished by the death penalty, but you know that in rabbinic law, if a person breaks a Torah law and they have to give him lashes, so they could give him only up to 39 lashes. In rabbinic law, at the time where Beis Din had the authority, if somebody broke a rabbinic law, he could be lashed without limit until the Rabbanan feel that he has learned his lesson. The nature of it being, the idea behind it being that we recognize that rabbinic law needs a greater strengthening, because exactly for this reason. Well, it's only rabbinic law. When I was growing up, my father, should live and be well, a very easygoing guy. Great father, great, best in the world. There's only one thing that could trigger him off immediately. That's if I'm one of three brothers, no sisters. If we ever raised our voice to our mother, he materialized out of thin air and was very unpleasant about it. And the reason is because he understood, and this is every father should understand this, with boys, especially with girls and mothers have a completely different relationship anyway. The mothers my wife half the time tells me stay out of it, it's her and the daughters. Because when I was horrified when I saw my daughters, the way they yell at my wife, the way they go at it, that's girls and mothers, a completely different relationship. But a boy will easily take advantage of his mother. And if you want the family to be successful, the mother has to be able to deal. Father's not always home. So when my father's home, if my father was anywhere within earshot, we always behaved. But if my father's out of the house, so then what leverage does my mother have? Because only the mother. So the leverage that she has is that she knows she's got the full support of the husband, and we're absolute ground meat if we give her a hard time. And that has to be established in the home, because that needs greater strengthening. So there is a concept that Torah law does not need as much fortification as rabbinic law. Because Torah law, we're all intimidated because it's Torah law, so we don't want to mess with it. Well, it's only a rabbinic law. Hold it, buddy. You know what rabbinic law is? Rabbinic law is a law, it's binding, you are accountable, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the fact that it is rabbinic law, according to many, whichever aspects of it is rabbinic law, is still very, very severe. Okay, then you have the spiritual component, which is that God, of all things, God hates immorality. There's a statement in the Talmud that there's nothing as repulsive in the eyes of God as people who walk around in the marketplace not fully clothed. I mean, people who are wearing and exposing themselves, because it is considered human nature. These things are by human nature. We understand that they really shouldn't be done. Immorality always carries with it a sense of shame. There's a sense of shame that's associated with immorality. And that's why it takes a lot to get past it. Women have a greater sense of shame. Could you imagine what the world would look like if they didn't? Men are, heck with the shame, let's have a good time. The women have that sense of shame, which is what stops things from deteriorating even further. When women lose their shame, then that's what the world looks like. So that is that's as far. Now, the next mitzvah is 168, which is that when a woman, when the days of purity are completed, that's a technical law, but that's not the technical law, it's not the end. What I want to get to, once her days of purity are completed, she has to bring sacrifices. And she has to bring a korban. Now, the truth of the matter is, anytime you bring a korban, there's always some sort of tshuva that's associated with a korban. You're bringing a tshuva as an atonement for something or other. I mean, a woman's given birth, what does she have to atone for? What does a woman have to atone? She's given birth, now she has to bring. Once she is no longer in her tamei state, according to halacha, she has to bring korbanos. She has to bring various sacrifices, and every sacrifice always carries with it some implication of atonement, either a greater degree, a lesser degree. What atonement is there for a woman that she's given birth? What's her fault she gave birth? That's how she was created. That's what she was made for. So where is the fault that she has to give birth, that she has to bring an atonement? So the commentary said like this, you see, when a woman is in labor, a woman will often make a mental or even verbal vow that she is never going to end up in this situation again. Which means she's basically saying she is going to cut off her relationship with her husband. The pain of that a woman ever wants to give birth a second time after she's given birth the first time is a miracle, and it's only because God put such a mothering nature into women. There are certain women, this is not uncommon at all, that after they have a baby, they come home from the hospital, they can't wait to have their next baby. The idea of giving birth is that, and women are very strange, by the way. In this area, there are certain women who actually there's something called postpartum. You ever heard of postpartum depression, which is a woman who, because again her body has been traumatized. She goes through a trauma with the giving birth. Up until 30 days in halacha, a woman is considered, I think even more, even 6 weeks, a woman is considered, for sure 30 days, she's considered ill. She's not fully healthy yet. She has to get her strength back, and she could be bleeding, and she could be weak, and now this postpartum stuff comes often from just the fact that she's worn down. She's worn down. She got to take care of an infant. She may have more children at home to take care of now, and it's wear and tear on the wife. It's very, very difficult. Number one, husband may not be sensitive enough to her needs, and he has to learn to be sensitive. Number two. She was, for a long time, it's like anything else in life, where after the event, there's a bit of a letdown. You're looking forward, you're pregnant, you give birth, you have a all of a sudden, there's a letdown, like anything else in life. Often after you come out, you ever come out of the movies, Sunday afternoon matinee was always the most depressing. You come out of the Sunday afternoon matinee, and then you're just thinking, gotta go back to school tomorrow, and I didn't study for the test. It's the fun of the weekend is over. You know what I mean? There's kind of a downer. Number three, there are women who claim that when they've given birth, they feel a sense of loss. Now go figure this one out. They actually feel a sense of loss. You know what the loss is? They have a baby. They have a viable child with them now, and they feel a sense of, you know what the loss is? Because that baby was in her. That means she actually had another life part of her. Okay, this is also part of her. It's outside of her now, and therefore she actually feels a letdown. They feel a letdown So the first idea over here is that a woman may have made a vow, and to atone for her vow, because obviously she's going to live for the false vow that she's made. Most of the time it's not verbal. It's just in her mind. She's thinking, I'm never going to do this again. Okay, so by the letter of the law, it's not a binding vow. It was in your mind. But since she thought it so, symbolically she has to bring an atonement, number one. Number two, there's the idea that anytime you've been in a life-threatening situation, have you ever heard of the Birkas HaGomel people make if they've been in a life-threatening situation? You thank God. If you've been in a life-threatening situation, you get an aliyah and you bench gomel. You don't have to get an aliyah. You just have to make the bracha in front of 10 people. It's just that the custom is to do it in shul, with with a minyan. But you don't have to. Many women, either the husband makes the bracha for her when he gets an aliyah. There are other women who they'll come to shul, they'll stand behind the mechitza, and you gather 10 men over, and she makes the bracha for men, and the men answer amen. She could do it in the house also. You call 10 men into the house, she can make the bracha in front of men. There's no problem there. And she benches gomel. So this is a form of thanking God for sparing her life, because a woman who gives birth is actually in a life-threatening situation. She is a misukenes. She's going through a life-threatening situation. Most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, Baruch Hashem, nothing happens. There's one religious hospital in Bnei Brak called Mayane HaYeshua, which they opened up a hospital in Bnei Brak, and they've been around for I think 10 or 15 years. They've never lost a woman, Baruch Hashem, during childbirth in all the years. But it is a potentially life-threatening situation. For us, Danny, go ahead.
When we fly, we're going to airplane, do we need to...
Good questions. I'm going to explain it right now. When we bench gomel, that's what I wanted to get today. When we bench gomel, to bench gomel, you have to be in what's called a life-threatening situation. If you're in a near miss, you don't bench gomel. So, for example, let's say you're driving and you swerve at the last second and you just avoid an accident. You don't bench gomel for that. You bench gomel when something has happened and you got off with much less than you should have. So if there's just a fender bender, so you don't bench gomel. But if a guy's been in a head-on smash and he didn't get killed in a head-on smash, in something that anybody would look at and say to you, yeah, that was potentially life, that could have terminated a life, you bench gomel for that. Now, with flying is something else, because the Gemara says that you bench gomel for crossing a desert, because that's a life-threatening situation, or crossing a body of water. Now, in the old days, you cross the body of water in a ship, and plenty of people lost their lives at sea. So you have to bench gomo when you cross the sea in a ship. Flying is actually a different of opinion among the poskim. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says that when you fly over a body of water, you bench gomo. Because the halacha of the Gemara simply says a body of water. So when you've flown over a body of water, you bench gomo. If you flew coast to coast in the United States, you would not bench gomo because you never flew over. It's not a question of flying being dangerous. Flying is not dangerous. To the contrary, driving is dangerous, not flying. Flying is not dangerous. And therefore, if you're in you don't bench gomel because of the danger of the actual flying. You bench gomel because of the crossing the body of water. There are many people who don't bench gomel flying. There are many people. I've been in England. When I go to England, I go to the shul there, and the yeshiva boys are coming back for Bein Hazman and for from Mir and all these other places. And one after the other, they get an aliyah and they bench gomel. Sometimes they'll just bench gomel. One person will be bench and motzi everybody. But you'll have them getting an aliyah one after the other benching gomel because you cross the sea to get to England. But there are poskim who say you don't have to bench gomel. But again, in our day and age, it's only if I remember meeting a guy in my shul who's not very scholarly. He goes up to the Torah, gets an aliyah, and he benches gomel. An older man. So I said to him, "Why did he bench gomel?" He says, "Well, he was sitting on a bus and there was a suspicious object on the street." So I said, "Yeah, what was it?" Well, it was okay. At the end, it was just somebody forgot a suitcase. He says, "But that's close enough for me." Well, that's a bracha levatala. That means you were never in danger to begin with. You were scared, but you were never in any danger. So if there would be a bomb, and they say, I don't know that you have to bench gomel. If a bomb went off near a person, chas v'shalom, and he survived it, then he'd have to bench gomel.